Director Paul Verhoeven is a name that often arises when one discusses the subject of movies that remain unmade. We never saw Verhoeven's Harry Houdini biopic starring Tom Cruise, or his Adolf Hitler biopic, and we didn't get to see his take on the life and times of Jesus Christ, Rasputin, or Madame Marie Tussaud. Nor would we see his filming of the Battle of Stalingrad, among many, many others. The unseen film that stings the most, however, one that went down in the flames of development hell back in 1994, was the chance to see the Crusades, more specifically the First Crusade, in a high-budget epic starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Such a production doesn't come cheaply, and with a projected budget of $120 million, over $210 million in today's market, remaining a sticking point, pre-production and planning would halt. The studio would lose their nerve, pull the plug, and the entire project would crash to a halt. The First Crusade, resulting in the epic battle between two middle-aged superpowers, would begin in 1095 and last for 4 years. It was the first of a number of crusades intended to recapture the Holy Lands. It started as a widespread pilgrimage in Western Christendom and ended as a military expedition by Roman Catholic Europe to regain the Holy Lands taken in the Muslim conquest of the Mediterranean, ultimately resulting in the recapture of Jerusalem in 1099. To make a film that could do justice to the horror and scope of this historical event is something that actor Arnold Schwarzenegger had envisaged since the late 1980s. Upon the release of RoboCop, Schwarzenegger would court its director Paul Verhoeven to work on Total Recall. During the production of Total Recall, Schwarzenegger would tell Verhoeven of his idea to set a movie during the holy wars of the Crusades, to which the director would respond enthusiastically. Verhoeven would say, "We agreed that we should not shoot the film in a completely serious way. It was Arnold who had the idea and who told me about it for the first time on the set of Total Recall. He wanted to make a film about the Crusades. I in turn spoke to Mario Casar, the boss of Corolco, the company that produced Total Recall, and we launched the project like that. And there was talk of shooting the film in the summer of 1994. To get the wheels in motion, Verhoeven's next call was to screenwriter Waylon Green. Green's previous writing credits had included The Wild Bunch and War Games, and the pair had just collaborated on what would later become Disney's Dinosaur. But the film had originally been conceived as something else entirely, a Verhoeven-directed silent film with stop-motion special effects by Phil Tippett. Variety magazine printed the story that Arnold had decided to step up his workload to 2 movies per year. When he finished James Cameron's True Lies and then the Ivan Reitman-directed comedy Junior at Universal, he'd immediately begin work on Crusade. Paul Verhoeven was quoted as saying, "Nothing like this has been filmed on this scale since Ben-Hur." Spain's medieval Loire castle would start to be transformed in preparation for the shoot, and Verhoeven would begin scouting locations by taking a helicopter to Casablanca, Marrakech, and the Sahara Desert. He would spend weeks at a time at each location trying to get a sense of atmosphere from each place as a cast and crew were assembled and over $13 million was spent on pre-production. Alongside Schwarzenegger, a headline cast was to include John Turturro, Gary Sinise, Robert Duvall, Charlton Heston, and Jennifer Connelly. Italian comic artist Massimo Rotondo was hired to sketch the following pieces of concept art, and over 22,000 costumes were made in preparation for the battle scenes. During the Amsterdam Film Festival, Verhoeven would tell the Film Lounge that, as he saw it, the story of the Crusades is the murderous attack of the Christians on the Arabs and the Jews. Do you think that's a politically interesting situation? If I could do it my way and be historically correct, the reality that the Pope instigated this complete slaughterhouse, which is the reality that started the pogroms against the Jews, and which ultimately had only one goal: to destroy as many Arabs as possible. The writer Wayland Green would later say, "While Paul was doing Total Recall with Arnold, he called me to tell me that he and Arnold had discussed a film project on the Crusades. They had no story, but the concept interested them, and Paul wanted me to think about it. I immediately accepted and immersed myself in the readings. I didn't know much about this period in history, the First Crusade. Finally, that towards the Middle East interested me for its theological aspect. The fact of having understood that the Muslims multiplied because their recruitment program promised direct access to paradise for the warriors, and that the Catholic Church immediately took hold of this idea. I said to Paul, there are a lot of elements to approach with a film like that. Arnold and Paul loved the first treatment I submitted, so I immediately started writing the script. I always thought that I had no problem with the first 2/3 of a script, but that it was always the end that was the concern. The difficulty here is that I tended towards a very harsh end, and without wanting to completely lose this bitterness, you had to keep in mind that it was going to be a film for Arnold and that it had to end on a heroic note. The audience who did not identify with Arnold in normal times would have also been interested in this film. The setup for the movie begins in the France of 1095, outside of an abbey. We meet the character of Hagen, a small-time criminal specializing in the theft of relics. Arrested whilst trying to rob the abbey's vault in the middle of the night, Hagen is caught and imprisoned and meets a Jewish vagrant by the name of Ari, who shares his cell. Ari was arrested when he was selling stale water by passing it off as holy water, making peasants in the region sick. Ari reveals to him that he once saw in a church in Jerusalem the most precious of the relics of the Christian world, namely the authentic cross on which Christ was crucified. The Pope speaks to the crowd of how God speaks through him and will make his will known through holy signs and miracles. Hagen seizes the opportunity and forms a plan. He passes his chains to the flame of the torch which lights his cell. He heats them to white and then puts them on his back, searing the flesh. The next day, when the jailer monk wakes them up, he discovers on Hagen's back a large cross burnt into his flesh. He believes he's witnessed a miracle, instantly dropping to his knees and kissing Hagen's hand. Hagen is led through the crowds, who are excited by witnessing the holy sign from God that they had prayed for. The Pope questions Hagen. Hagen tells him the cross on his back appeared during a dream he had had. In the dream, he fought in a battle for Jerusalem, and he saw a cross carefully preserved and encrusted in a block of stone. The Christians believe they have found their holy prophecy. For them, this miracle means that Hagen has presented the divine stigmata of an elected official, and it's decided that Hagen must lead the crusade. The screenplay received positive approval from all who read it, and the screenwriter, Gary Goldman, would join production to rewrite and contribute to what would become the shooting draft. Here is Goldman on the Projection Booth podcast, recalling his time on the project.
Crusade is one of the best scripts I've ever read.
Yeah, it's a good script. And basically this was an original screenplay by Wayland Green, who's a great writer. Paul had that script, and he had kind of turned against it. He said, I don't know, I like it, but I don't like it anymore. What do you think? And I said, I think it's really great. He thought I was really mistaken. But in any case, I worked with him on it for a while, and we got it to the point where he liked it again. But he also, I think we got it to the point where we realized that it had always been good. He realized that it had always been good. and that, and that we just, we tried to make it somewhat better. In any case, and it was supposed to get made. It had been budgeted, and it was on its way to getting made, but it was just too expensive, and the studio stepped back from it. It was a casualty of the fact that Paul Verhoeven is a very, very honest person. He's Dutch and he's forthright, and he didn't play the games of, pretending that he could do it cheaper. I think that rather than trusting that when he gave, in the end, he probably, he would have been a hit, and he should have probably done what he, that Geraldo didn't make it. Instead, they made Cutthroat Island, which probably ended up costing them as much as, or more than Crusade would have made it, would have cost them. But in any case, there was a certain moment when a decision needed to be made, and Paul, instead of saying, "Well, I can cut this and I can cut that," or "No, you're telling me to do this. Can you shoot this for this much instead of this for $10 million less?" And instead of just saying, "Yes, I can," he said, "No, I'm not going to lie to you." And so that was, in Hollywood, you have, really, for things to get done, people don't have the courage to make these tough decisions. They need to be lied to. Paul didn't do that, and so the movie didn't get made.
Verhoeven's co-director was to be former legendary stuntman turned second unit director, Vic Armstrong. Armstrong would later say in his book, The True Adventures of the World's Greatest Stuntman, that I later worked with Paul on Starship Troopers, but before that, around 1994, he was going to make another picture with Arnold called Crusade, a massive epic. By then, Paul was a great buddy of mine and had total faith in me, so I was going to shoot all the sequences out on location in Morocco, and he was going to shoot the studio work. During meetings, Verhoeven expressed a desire to have 600 horses on the production. I went, Jesus, 600 horses? You have no idea how much room they take up. It's a huge undertaking. You have grooms, 1 to every 2 horses. You have the saddles, blacksmiths, tents, catering, living accommodation, the water. It's a massive, massive commitment. You're going to get people dying. With that amount of people and horses, somebody's going to die. You know that. It's going to be like a small city. He said, "Oh my God, do you mean that?" I said, "More than likely somebody's going to get kicked or trodden on or have a heart attack. That's just what happens when you get that amount of people together for 6 months." He said, "How many horses do you think we should have?" I said, 300 should be more than enough. And he seemed okay with that. A couple of weeks later, one of his assistants called me and said, "Paul's been thinking about what you said about the horses, but he wants to go back to using 800. He added another 200. "Whatever, guys," I said, "it's your money." It would have been an amazing film. There was one brilliant sequence where Arnie escorts this girl, who fancies him like mad because of his body, and they get captured by a band of vagabonds. Arnie is whacked over his head, and then the whole screen goes black. When he wakes up, we, the audience, see through his eyes a jackal snapping and snarling in his face. The camera pulls back, and Arnie has been trussed up and stuck inside a dead donkey with his head sticking out of its arsehole. Surrounding the carcass is a pack of jackals. Eventually, he bursts out, chases the jackal away, and hunts for the girl. Just great stuff. It's a shame we never made it. Armstrong would register extra disappointment, as during his prep work on Crusade, he would decline an offer to work on Mel Gibson's Braveheart, and would ultimately end up doing neither. Writer Waylon Green would speak of the scene with the donkey carcass, saying, "I borrowed to the right and to the left. It's funny because I realised that I recently reread one of the 2 books that inspired me. It's a classic book from the 2nd century called The Golden Ass, being the metamorphosis of Lucius Apuleius. The idea of the hero sewn inside the corpse of a donkey came from there. The other story that inspired me is that of Pope Joan by the Greek Emmanuel Rhodes. In this book, there was a Roman character who stole and sold relics across Europe. I wrote this script. It received a lot of attention. Everyone who read it loved it. In the absence of a film, there is perhaps reason to draw a good comic strip."
I think it's so expensive to do, and it was written for Arnold Schwarzenegger, who ended up buying it and owning it and so forth. It's now sort of a backdoor script for film students, who read it and every now and then write me a letter or something telling me to autograph a copy. But I don't see it getting made. I tried to talk Arnold into doing it as a graphic novel, but I don't know, he didn't seem to respond to that.
Verhoeven would say, he wrote a very interesting screenplay that we all liked, and there was talk of shooting the film in the summer of 1994. At the time, Mario Casar had launched Crusade at the same time as Cutthroat Island by Rennie Harlin, and the 2 films were very expensive. Their budget was estimated at $120 million each. However, Carolco could not bet on the 2 films at the same time. The company did not have $240 million in the bank. It was then that Mario made the unfortunate decision to cancel our project and make Cutthroat Island instead. I think that this choice was a fatal error for his company, and even if I cannot guarantee that Mario would have kept Carolco afloat if he had preferred to do Crusade, it is obvious that our scenario was much better than that of Cutthroat Island. We had found the right tone thanks to the script by Waylon Green, which was tailor-made for Arnold in the manner of Total Recall, and there was a tremendous irony. I still remember the end. Obviously, in historical reality, it was Godfrey of Bouillon who became the King of Jerusalem, but in our fiction, the throne is first promised to the character Arnold played, and he refuses. And we ended the film on a note in tribute to Voltaire's optimism, when the character returns home with the Arabian princess and decides to cultivate his garden. It was magnificent. What a pity that the film was not made. In Arnold Schwarzenegger's office, there's a large frame on the wall which houses a poster for DeMille's 1935 epic, The Crusades, a daily reminder to Schwarzenegger of what could have been. Schwarzenegger would later tell Empire magazine how he remembered it, saying, "It was all written and ready to go, but then Paul started going crazy. We had the final meeting with the studio and we were all sitting at this boardroom table. They said, 'So the budget is $100 million. That's a lot of money. What kind of guarantees do you have that we will get it for 100 and it won't end up to 130? He says, "What do you mean guarantees? There's no such thing as guarantees. Guarantees don't happen, and if anyone promises you guarantees, they're lying. We don't even know that if you walk out of the building here, you won't get hit by a truck. There's no guarantee that we're going to make it till tomorrow. I cannot have control over God. I don't even believe in God. Why am I talking about God? But someone, nature, could just rain for 3 months and then what do we do? How can I give you a guarantee? This is ludicrous." I kept kicking him under the table and trying to tell him to shut up whilst we're ahead, but he just wouldn't. And that was it. That was the end of that movie. Paul always tried to be honest, but you can be a little bit sensitive about when to be honest and when to just move on with the project. It was a shame.
The script of The Crusades is in the hands of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And when we were working on the movie, and we were already building, in fact, the walls of Jerusalem in Morocco, it turned out that the company that I was working with, Carolco, couldn't afford it. There was not enough money, and we broke it off. And Arnold, we had a pay-or-play contract. So Mario Casar, head of the company, owned him whatever, $12 million or something, which they hadn't either. And so they paid Arnold some money and they gave him the script. So the only person that can revive the Crusade is Arnold. The film, Ridley Scott's film about the Crusades, I saw that, and again, basically, if you compare it to the script we had that was written by Waylon Green, our script was written by a well-known American writer, Waylon Green, who also wrote, for example, The Wild Bunch. And so it had a certain lightness. Also, you can see that in The Wild Bunch. And you had really to laugh. It was not a very hard, not continuously a harsh movie. It was like RoboCop. There were moments that you could basically relax. And so, and Kingdom of Heaven, of course, is straight on without any smile. So I think it still would be an interesting experiment to do the Crusades, but I have no power to make it work. For example, the end of the movie Crusades is after he has done the Crusades and people want him to make the king, Arnold, the king of Jerusalem, what was Godfrey von Bouillon, bien sûr. And then he doesn't do that. He says, no, I found a woman and I go to, and in fact the ending was really cultiver son jardin. That's not heroic, yeah? But that was the end of the movie, really. It was really Voltaire, but bomb. That's my statement.
The project was officially cancelled in May 1994. That November, Carolco reported that Schwarzenegger had agreed to settle his claim for his acting fee in exchange for the right to the project. Carolco also said that if the star can find another studio to produce Crusade within a 3-year period, he would reimburse Carolco for the part of its $13.3 million already spent in pre-production expenses. The subject of Crusade would arise again as Verhoeven collected a Lifetime Achievement Award, to which the director said, "I really regret never making it. I thought it would have been something wonderful." I for one agree with him. And so concludes the story of why Crusade was never filmed.